Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our day 3 of Math Assessment and Intervention Week and our second session of the day for our educator panel on using PLC time to create a strong MTSS for math and literacy. I'm going to go ahead and get us started with just a few housekeeping slides. But now's a great time to go ahead and drop in the chat what's your name, where are you from, what's your role in education, or maybe even like why you're joining us today. While you all do that, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to just go over these a few helpful tips and then introduce us to Molly and get us started. So, if you would like to access closed captioning, you can go ahead and click the CC button in the bottom tray, and that will pop up subtitles for you throughout this webinar. We'd love participation, so we'd love for you to go ahead and just use that chat. If you have things that you're interested in, if you have comments about what our speakers are sharing, we'd love to hear from you in the chat. But if you have burning questions that you would love to be answered, please feel free to use the Q&A feature on Zoom. That way we can go ahead and take some time at the end if there is an opportunity to ask our panelists and Molly a couple questions that you guys might have. You should receive a certificate of attendance from Zoom after this webinar, so keep an eye out for that from Zoom. But we will also share all of our resources and stuff on a landing page after the conclusion of our webinar week. So keep an eye out for an email from us as well. With that being said, I'd love to introduce all of you to Molly Catalano. Molly is a dedicated educator and advocate for science instruction based in Annapolis, Maryland. She has a rich background in teaching both elementary and middle school students, but her current focus is collaborating with K-12 educators to help them revolutionize science instruction and create engaging learning experiences with their students. Now, I'm very excited to go ahead and pass things over to our speakers for today. So, Elena, I'm going to go ahead and kick it off to you.
Thank you. My name is Elena Garrig, and I am a K-6 literacy coach from Fair Lawn, New Jersey. And my passion is early literacy with a focus on structured literacy and dyslexia intervention.
And Jessica.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jessica Matei. I am currently a curriculum supervisor for science, math, and any subject that is connected to those. I have a major passion for math instruction. I'm currently earning a doctorate in math education because I just like to torture myself more and more with learning. And I'm very excited to be here and share some of my experiences with you.
That's so funny, Jessica. My mom just recently finished her doctorate in social work, and I felt like she got addicted to going to like college courses.
Yes,
it was
it is.
just like
It's a
so
real
funny.
thing.
Mandy, I'd love to hear from you as well.
Yeah, hello, I'm Mandy Stewart. I'm from the Cleveland area. I am a curriculum coordinator, so I look over elementary, all the content areas. I spent some time, about 10 years in the classroom, and then I was a literacy coach for a few years. So literacy is really my wheelhouse, but I am opening up into the math and science world as well. So I'm just excited to be here.
Well, thank you all so much for being here. We're like really excited to hear from the three of you today, and of course, Molly. With that being said, I'll go ahead and kick things over to you, Molly.
Perfect. Thank you, Ryan. Hi, everyone. Oh my gosh, we have so many participants. I love seeing where everyone is from in the chat. Please keep the chat up. We've got all the windows open. We want to see what everyone is saying as we're going through today. But happy Wednesday. My name is Molly. I'm going to be your host for today's webinar, and I'm really excited to chat with our fabulous panel of educators to talk all about using PLC time to create a strong MTSS for math and literacy. But before we jump in, let's address the elephant in the room. The world of education, it loves an acronym, right? So some of you joining us today might already know what these acronyms mean, but for those that don't, you may feel somewhat similar to my good friend Brittany. So we're going to quickly define what these mean before we dive into our chat. All right, so what is MTSS? MTSS stands for Multi-Tiered System of Supports. This is a comprehensive framework that is designed to provide systematic and differentiated support to all students. This tiered approach includes universal interventions for all learners, more targeted interventions for those that are at risk, and then intensive interventions for those students who have specific needs. Now, the goal of an MTSS is to use the data that's been being collected to support the whole child, that entire child, not just academic purposes, but their behavioral, their social, emotional well-being too. So why do districts go with an MTSS? It's more efficient, it's more equitable compared to just using an RTI or PBIS. Oh my gosh, more acronyms. I know, I am so sorry I just said that. But adopting an MTSS, it is a big shift for a district or a school. It's not just about using interventions and looking at that tiered support. It's about changing the culture or the system that's at hand. So it's going to require that commitment from leaders for that whole child approach. And why is this going to benefit all of the students? Collaboration amongst various roles in the building and dedicated time, that's the most important piece, right? We have to set across time to review this data, plan those supports. We need reliable ways to collect, to track, and to analyze this student data. I love the transparent communication with families, caregivers about the supports, but as well partnering with community services when maybe those resources are not found in your building. We've got to go beyond the school. And lastly, ongoing, not just that one-time high-quality professional development. We need to make sure that it is continuous and that it's aligned with MTSS practices. Now, with that being said, we've broken down what the MTSS entails. Let's look at where this takes place, and that is during our PLC time. All right, another acronym. So that's why I wanted to really dive deep. We have to figure out these acronyms before we chat. So what is a PLC? This is a professional learning community, structured group of educators who are going to work collaboratively and continuously to improve teaching and learning for all students. Now, this may look different in every building or every district. So some examples, and if these resonate, drop it in the chat. If you're using a PLC currently, tell us about it within the chat. It may look like the fourth grade team who meets bi-weekly. They're going to bring their data, whether that's benchmark, behavior, PBIS. They're going to discuss growth and actionable next steps. This might be that intermediate math team that comes together to compare student benchmark scores around a specific concern, whether that's fractions. We're going to look and address some misconceptions. We're going to plan for some reteaching strategies. Or it could look like a non-classroom teacher, right? That's going to join those classroom teachers to review maybe progress monitoring data, decide who needs tier 2 and tier 3 support. But in natural fashion, side note, I loved my PLC time when I taught middle school. You'll see here on the screen, I had to dig in those archives to find these photos. We would meet bi-weekly. We analyzed data. We looked at students, you ready for this, who had BIPs or STIPs. I know, more acronyms. We love it. We looked at attendance data from those who flagged our attention. But the most important piece is that we'd assign tasks for every member that was doable within our own scope, our own workload, right? By making sure we each had something to help meet our overarching goals. Now, another side note, we'd also debrief that week's episode of The Bachelor, but that's after, of course, we talked about what we needed to talk about. So shout out to my Wildcats. They would love that I put them up here. But now, I love that people are like, yes, we definitely looked at JoJo's season of The Bachelor. That was a hot topic. Okay. Now, joining me today, we have fabulous educators from all over, and we're going to dive directly on in. We're going to be chatting all things MTSS, all things PLC, but really bringing in our experiences. So if any of these resonate, make sure to pop it in the chat. We want to keep this conversation going, even outside of us. So I'm going to start us off. I'll round robin, but can each of you share one way that PLC time has been most valuable in building a strong MTSS in your district? And I'm going to start us off with Mandy.
Yeah, so we really have been building this process over the past few years. It really started with just creating the time and the space to have teachers be able to collaborate. We had to have a schedule change to even make that happen, get all the pieces and parts in place. We found out it wasn't something that we could rush because we wanted to be very intentional about it. So now we're into kind of year 2 where we are really getting into the work, getting into the meat of things. And what this has done, like, has impacted us the best is that people aren't working in silos anymore. They have a space to be able to talk about their students, to be able to bounce ideas off of each other, and decisions aren't made, independently. Everything is done as a team. So that's really what has been the biggest impact to us so far.
Now, I love that you mentioned that you had to change schedules around because we know time is the most precious commodity in any building. My friend Sarah in the chat just mentioned that their school is struggling to find time to allow them to collaborate. So, this is me going on a tangent. So, everybody here, buckle up because we are diving in. Mandy, how did you make that shift saying, like, hey, time is precious, but we need to allocate time to meet? How did you make that shift? Did you have some pushback? How did that go?
Yeah, so it was quite a process. It took a year of planning. It is really kind of even an out of the box schedule where teachers have, a traditional schedule. You might have your 40 minutes of plan every day. We looked at this very untraditionally, where several days of the week there may not be a plan period. There's still lunch period, but then there's one day of the week where they get a big chunk, 2.5 hours of planning time.
That's amazing.
And during that planning time is also the grade level collaboration time where, the principal and some of those team members you mentioned, like reading specialists or intervention specialists, curriculum specialists, who are involved during this. So there, of course, you can't please everybody. And it's bit like, especially in elementary, we are creatures of habit. So it did take a lot of mindset shifts. But once, we got it up and running, we could see maybe some tweaks we had to make. And we did make a few tweaks going into year 2. It's been a learning experience, but it most definitely has given our teachers the time to be able to work with each other, and enough time where they feel like, when we used to have those 30 or 40-minute, plan times, we were making copies and we had to use the restroom and we never had time to just accomplish anything. So having a large block of time has been really helpful.
And that's like the trickle down effect too, right? If the teachers and people in the building see that this is a priority, we are making a shift to have this dedicated space, they're going to take that almost more seriously, right? There's more gravity, there's more weight to that. So I think that doing that in the front, people might have some questions, but in the long run, that's really going to benefit. Elena, I'm going to pass it over to you. Tell me about what's happening with MTSS. What have been some positives?
So thank you. Similar to what Mandy said, this is a work in progress for us in Fairlawn. This is our 3rd year using the M-Class reading platform, specifically with the Dibbles 8. And we started really small. We started with our 1st grade across the district. We're a bigger district in New Jersey. We have 6 elementary schools. And we started our PLC time or data time with all district 1st grade teachers during grade level meetings. And we would look at the data, and then we would see how we can really target our tier 1 from that data and within our 1st grade team across the district. And then last year we started to have smaller groupings. Each coach has 2 buildings that they're in charge of. So each coach would help grade level teams with the interventionists using the data to, in between the benchmarking times of year, to make sure that we were checking in our progress monitoring with the students in the small group in the tier 2 intervention periods. So we were checking to see if those students were really responding to the both settings, the settings in their pullout and also in their general education settings, to make sure that, we were, kind of speaking the same language with both, interventionist and general education teacher.
I love that you utilize a coach, right? So when you started, you're like, this is holistic. We're all going to look at all of this. And now when we branch into, we've gotten our sea legs with how this approach looks. How did you decide on a coach? What did that process look like? And what has the coach noticed? I think that this is unique. I haven't heard of this specific. So I think that the general group is going to love to hear this too.
Well, we're very fortunate in our district that our district really values a coach. So we do have a lot of coaches for math and literacy and science in our district at the elementary level. So we've gotten a lot of support from the supervisors and administrators as a coach in the district to to really run with instituting the DIBELS in the as our screener for our primary grades. And we were the ones that were trained, and we were the ones that helped then we were trained as train the trainers, and then we helped train the teachers to be able to give the assessment to all of their students. And that, again, was a very slow process. So it just kind of came naturally from the administration that the coach would help lead those PLC or those data meetings to help with the MTSS in their buildings, because we know the teachers the most, we work with those grade levels the most, so it just was a natural way to be the liaison between the general education teachers and the interventionists. And then this year we hope to bring in the ML educators as well, so that we have like a very strong and robust team when we're discussing student data.
And that's so important because, I mean, I taught elementary and middle school. Middle school, you get to work with a little bit more of everybody in the building more often. Elementary, you are locked in, right? This is your group. This is your four walls. So I think that's really important that you have a diverse group of people all working together. But that common thread that you and Mandy both said was that higher up notice that this is an importance. So we are going to make sure that there is dedicated time. There are dedicated people to make sure that this is going to run smoothly. The one thing you said was that it was a slow process. And I am very type A. I could be AAA if there was a diagnosis for that, right? So a slow process could make me itch. But I think if you want things done very well and efficiently and have those processes cemented, slow is good. We like a slow burn. So I think that that's a good thing. And that's something for all of my friends in the chat and everyone that's here. This doesn't have to be done right now, right away. I think baby steps, and we'll talk about that soon, but baby steps are important. Slow is good, right? Thank you for sharing that. All right, Miss Jessica, over in PA, what is happening? And just a side note, Jessica took so many kids on a field trip today in the woods. And look how fabulous she looks. She is chipper.
That's great. I don't look like I was in the humid air all day at all. I did
No.
such a nice compliment.
There is not a frizz in sight, my friend. You
not
look
a frizz
so
in
good.
sight. So my experience with this has been similar to Elena's and Mandy's. I will say though, if you're listening and you're already frustrated thinking, well, we don't have common planning time. I don't have coaches. You really have to find a way to be water around the rocks with this. Like in my district, I used to be an instructional coach in my past district, and our model was very similar to what Elena just described. But in my current district, we don't have coaches yet. I'm hoping that we will eventually. But we do have 4 supervisors of curriculum and instruction, myself being one. And so we take on that role a little bit. And we don't have necessarily time for full-blown PLCs in our schedules right now outside of what they call a data meeting. And the data meetings are more, they're every 2 weeks, they come together, everyone talks about everyone's progress, and they have those conversations about where support is needed. But then where the fallout can happen is then it's like, okay, well, when are we going to plan what we're doing to support the kids? And that can be frustrating. So in our last teacher contract, we had time that was built in there that we changed. And now we have something that we call PLM, monthly. And that time is used to kind of piggyback on what was going on in the data meetings. And I think your original question is what's something positive that's been going on? And I would say it's really the focus on tier 1. So I feel like people build tier 2. They talk about, criteria for kids to get in and what are the supports we're going to use and what resources will we use for them. And all of that is great. But I don't know who said this. I saw it in a webinar somewhere, in a book somewhere. You cannot intervene your way out of a tier 1 problem. And it's so real. There are so many things that go on in tier 1 that are unaddressed. And our PLM time has been a wonderful time for us to talk through that. And what's been the best for me is watching all of our teachers come together with a common goal of how can we make tier 1 more accessible, more engaging, and get kids just doing the math. And they've really worked hard together to get kids up out of seats, working together at whiteboards, learning more about UDL. How can we make things more visual and represent these concepts in a way that kids can actually grapple with? And that is what PLM time is used for. So I really leverage my teachers in that. And I have them come to the PLM to literally showcase something they did that week. They share it with their colleagues. They get in course-alike groups at the secondary level, because I mainly supervise secondary, but it's similar at the elementary level. And then they just talk through, hey, here's how I did it and here's why, and what would that look like in your course? And that time has been amazing, because as I go into these classrooms, I see a lot of differentiation happening within the tier 1 and a lot of UDL practice happening. It's another acronym. Sorry, Molly. Universal Design for Learning, just to be sure. But I would say that's probably the best thing I've seen, because while I share what Elena and Mandy are saying about, looking at data and designing supports, yes, but another big part of MTSS that's often ignored is what is happening in the classroom, the general classroom. So that's been very powerful for us.
So what we're going to do at Amplify, we are going to make a sticker that says you can't intervene your way out of a tier 1 problem. Ryan, Chelsea, Faith, get marketing on it. We are going to make this a sticker for everyone. I just listened to a podcast the other day that said if you're noticing that you have a chunk, and I'm going to say that with bold and italics, right? A chunk of kids in tier 2, it's not an intervention problem. It is a tier 1 problem. Look at what you're using in core. Is that aligned with your school's goals? And if it's not, that's a different question. That's when you can have Amplify come in and we can chat about other issues, right? But Jessica, I love that you're bringing artifacts, right? Things that have worked well, and how can we apply them? Even if it's not like you are just the science teacher in 7th grade, how can I apply this to other avenues? Monica is, look at you. Jessica has her own fan base over here. I love that so much. Okay, now the next elephant in the room is everyone's favorite real word, not an acronym. It's data, right? We're going to look at data. We're analyzing data. We rip it apart. We bring it together. Regardless of if you're using M-Class or Amplified Desmos Math, or maybe people are on the call are using other data systems that we won't name, right? You could be using that. But how do you use assessment data, right, to really identify those students' needs when you're having those PLC conversations? Elena, I'm going to start with you on this one.
Yeah, so we use the data from M-Class that we get from the screener and the benchmarking system to determine, and we lean on the M-Class platform a lot to determine the progress monitoring that we should give to specific students. So that's one thing that we taught our teachers in Gen Ed, all our tier 1 teachers, like, hey, not everybody is going to need to be progress monitored based on the data that we see, but let's lean on the suggestions from the program, which has been amazing for us. It really breaks it down and the teachers aren't overwhelmed. Our interventionists do the progress monitoring of their students. And that's why we need to come together during these PLC or our data days to make sure that, we're sharing the information that we see, and to make sure that we're taking a look at those graphs and those outcomes, and to see if what we're doing in real time is actually working. So it's great to have a general outcome measure through the DIBELS, but this year we're trying to incorporate another layer in our PLC time and have like skill specific mastery data on top for our tier 2 and tier 3 students on top of the general outcome measure. So that's a new layer that we're trying this year.
And you know what? I feel like if you do a new layer each year, right? We're talking about that slow process. And I feel like if you do something different each year, if you're looking at a 5-year plan, that's going to be pretty fantastic, right? Now, I am a STEM specialist, so literacy scares me a smidge. However, I do know that M-Class DIBELS data is like the coup de grace, right? It tells you everything. And I like that not just your classroom teachers have that login, right? Like anyone who has access to those kids can dive in. But the data is very robust, right? Like it shows the groupings, it shows when did I progress monitor. What suggestions would you have for someone who might not have as robust data as M-Class, right? If they had we're not going to name a name, they have another program's data, how would you best have them decipher that, right? If they didn't have necessarily like the groups that were put out or the different resources that were aligned, what suggestions would you have?
So my suggestion would be you would have to break it down by, what part of the literacy that your students are showing some struggle in or gaps. Like, is it decoding and a phonics issue, or is it a fluency issue with automaticity? So I think that you should break it down in that way first, because that will tell you what to target, in your settings for those students.
Absolutely. Mandy, same question. How are you using that data to really guide PLC time over in your neck of the woods?
Yeah, so similar to Elena, we use M-Class Dibbles as well, but we're only in year 2 of that. Over the past few years, I've always thought, we've been very data rich, but information poor. We had lots of different assessment types going on, but none of it was really like useful, and we weren't getting any actionable like steps out of it. So I feel like now that we have M-Class, it has been a game changer because it's pinpointing those specific skill gaps that we need to target with our students, and we can create those groupings and whatnot. But also going back to the tier 1 tangent, it's really just giving us a pulse on like tier 1 as a whole, or a grade level as a whole. Like we can see what does the general proficiency look like in this grade level, and if we're seeing like, wow, it looks like a chunk of these kindergartners, their phonemic awareness skills are lacking, then okay, let's throw in a class-wide tier 1 intervention. So it's really helped us to be able to not only determine and make instructional decisions for the students who are needing support in tier 2 and tier 3, but it really has helped us just have a general sense of our health of tier 1.
Yeah, and I think a pulse check is nice every once in a while, right? You go into an adoption of whether it's core or intervention programs, and from the initial, you're like, we love this. We bought it for a reason, but then you might not second guess it, right? Until like that adoption comes up, where I think these conversations are really important to have because you're getting various people's perspectives of what is working well in my classroom, but also what is the data showing. Tying in with what you said, Mandy, if you're looking at data, right? Data is great. We can get data on anything and everything. But when you're just getting inundated with data, if there's no, well, what now? What does that even mean? The worst part is when you're telling very busy teachers, hey, here's your data, now do something about it. Well, they're going to go on Teachers Pay Teachers. They're going to, if they have access, mind you, buy their own stuff. It takes forever to find resources that make sense. So having plug and play resources that are aligned with skills or concepts that are already at a gap is so helpful. And I bet your teachers are very thankful. Like, thank you for giving us time back on our plate that we can allocate to my job, helping kids, right? I keep up the chat, everyone. This is amazing. I like that we are dabbling off of each other. This is rich, and this is our own PLC, if you will, within the chat, which is amazing. All right, now I'm just going to call you Jess because that's where we're friends now, right?
Yeah,
So instead of okay, what's happening with you in terms of data? How is that guiding your conversation?
Yeah, sure. At first, I love Patty's comment, drowning in data while starving for insight. I feel like so many teachers feel like that.
Next sticker. That's the next sticker.
Yeah, seriously, it is, because I like how you said, Molly, too. Here's what's not helpful. Here's all of your data. Figure it out. I do feel like at some point, so the way we use data, we aren't fortunate enough to have M-Class just yet in my district. That's something we could certainly consider for the future, but we do use Amplified Desmos Math to support our intervention courses. And the one thing that I think, so our state level assessments, I feel like there's just way too many hats hung on them a little bit. There's nothing more frustrating than my Algebra 1 teachers, having data come back to them and kids are coming in like basic or more than they should be, or really low proficient. We don't have as many advanced as we should, whatever it is, because it's not a reflection of the Algebra 1 teacher or Algebra 1 curriculum. It is a K through Algebra 1 issue. And I feel like that's the number one thing we push to our teachers, because this is like an alignment issue all around. You need to have a tier 1 that's aligned K through 12. And then you also have to have interventions that exist somewhere. If you have no intervention that exists somewhere, you will never crawl out of this hole ever. And I feel like sometimes teachers are trying to do the intervention in their class, and you can't do that because to a level you can differentiate and teach a skill that came right before to kind of provide access, like that just-in-time instruction that we've talked about before. But if you're teaching like 1 to 2 grade levels below during your grade level block, well, now that's an equity issue. Now we're widening gaps. And so that won't work either, even though they're well-intended. And so our data, we use our state level data to kind of assess where we are curriculum and alignment wise, I would say. And then we move more to the tool that we use locally, that's like M-Class, that kind of gives us an idea about specific skills of where kids are. And in math, that's really important because during our intervention, what would not be good is if you're, saying, oh, these kids have these gaps in numbers and operations, but I'm in the middle of an algebra unit in my grade level course. Well, there's no alignment there, so that's not going to close any gaps. So the one way we use it is we really pull on the domain data and we look at where kids are, and that helps us create our intervention groups so that those kids are receiving instruction in prior grade level concepts to support them in access to the grade level concept they're learning in class. So they have both of those things happening. And we run them the way research would say, where the kids are getting about 35 to 45 minutes every 4 days at least, if not more. Some kids have 3 because they're back and forth with reading, but most are 4 or more. And then in addition to that, our grade level curriculum assessments are also aligned and common. So we're able to use those to assess if we're meeting the mark instructionally and making sure grade level is where it needs to be, or making sure that the gaps we're trying to close are actually reaching, and if that's working. And those are the conversations we're able to have in those data meetings or at those PLMs to do that. I do want to shout out to Desmos. When I taught Algebra 1, I used the Desmos core curriculum. I'm obsessed with it. It's so good in 100 ways, but this resource has been excellent to support our intervention, because my teachers are able to say, okay, I'm in, the unit on ratio, for example, in 6th grade, and they can go into Desmos ratio unit, and there's a differentiation tab, and they can go down and find all of the prior lessons that were prerequisite to that. And it's really easy to pull what they would need from there to support either a small group instruction within the intervention or the whole group. So it's been just immensely helpful. And so far it's going really well this year. We're running our intervention course for the first time this year in our middle school.
I love that. And we did not pay Jessica to just say this, FYI. She said this on her own free will. I do love the differentiation tables that are built within the lesson, the beyond the lesson strategies. They're so helpful. You mentioned something, Jessica, earlier about like the pullout, right? And in that same podcast I was listening to, the host was saying, if we're pulling kids out of that whole group for intervention services, they're missing like the core. They're missing that. So now we're going to widen that gap even further, right? So we were talking about time, making sure we had time for PLCs, but also to strategically make sure that we're not removing kids from the core instruction, because we don't want gaps along the way either. Was that a part of your your discussion when kind of aligning your not your bell schedule, but how things worked?
Yeah, creating a schedule. So that is a major thing. So our intervention, that's a great question. Our middle school schedule is brand new this year in this district. And then in my past district, they also had a schedule change to be able to accommodate this. When I first got here before the schedule change, we just used what a lot of districts have, that last period win time or whatever it's called, advisory. There's 100 names. And we did our best with that, but for a myriad of reasons, it didn't work. Kids were pulled out for other services, or they were going to sports or whatever. So we built a separate course into their day that does not take place during their math class. So they will go to their math class and then they go to this course. And what lives on the other side of the course for students who wouldn't be in there are other additional opportunities for our other kids. So for example, in our 6th grade, we have a course called 6th grade seminar, which is really focused on just like supportive strategies to access school. It's like there's a lot of like there's some PBIS stuff in there. There's some like study skills stuff in there. There's a whole lot of different things in there that our teachers came together and wrote. And that's a great opportunity for kids, but it's not something they all have to have.
Yeah.
So it works because you feel okay about the fact that, hey, your need right now is showing in math or reading and a need for intervention. We want to help course correct that before you get higher and into the high school, and you're not going to be missing anything to not have been in that class, because some of those concepts are also reinforced by your intervention teachers naturally, or by your grade level teachers. And then as they go up, there's a course like that in each grade level. There's something different so that they're not missing anything. And it took a lot of collaboration and a lot of curriculum writing, and a lot of meetings with a lot of administrators and teachers. But I think we got there, and it's all in service of making sure that they are prepared for what's coming next.
I can just see like the post-its of time making that schedule, like as you're saying that. And that works so well, right? When you're not pulling out of something, and that time that you all created sounds almost like an avid, right? Which is beneficial for kids when they're getting used to the middle school model, which is a bear on its own. I would love to know if people in the chat at the elementary level, how are you working around the schedule of pull-out services? Because we don't necessarily have a win time for our little learners, right? We need to, and then don't get me started on getting pulled out of science class at the elementary level, because that could be a whole nother webinar. Ryan's like, we're not scheduling a webinar for that, Molly, and there's no stickers for that either. But that's all very important, right? To make sure that kids, it's the equity issue. Kids need to see the core, but also if what they're not having, we need to have that pull out time, but also not taking it away, right? Okay, you can see that I go off on a tangent. This is what my PLC times would look like, because I was that kid, the social butterfly on report cards, right? So when we talk The Bachelor or Housewives. So the next question is, how do we get down to the nitty gritty and everyone stays on topic during that PLC time, right? We're not, yes, we want to kiki a little bit about what's happening because it's our friends. When you're in a education space, those are your people, right? They're your Christmas card list people. So how do we stay on task? How do we have that overarching goal in mind rather than just saying, Ryan's on a BIP, we got to talk about him for a second next in the check mark, right? Mandy, I'm going to have you start us on this one. How do you keep everyone on task? Do you have like procedures, like housekeeping at the beginning? How did that look like to set up?
Sure, yeah. So when we were planning, what these PLC meetings might look like, we didn't want to get too caught up in a whole bunch of forms and things that were going to be, wasting time with lots of typing and whatnot. But we did feel like we needed some sort of note catcher to keep us all on the same page. And we've got 6 elementary schools, so we wanted to be somewhat aligned with the practices we were doing. So we do have a note catcher, and our PLCs really revolve around like 4 guiding questions. What do we want our students to know? How will we know if they're learning it? What are we going to do if they're not learning it? And what are we going to do for those students who already know it? How are we going to extend their learning? And really those 4 questions keep us on task, because if you think about what do we want our students to know, that leads to standards, and it leads to our curriculum. And how will we know if they're learning? Well, we're tracking their progress with their progress monitoring, our curriculum-based assessments. What are we doing differently? That's what we are doing maybe during our intervention blocks or differentiation within the classroom. And then for those students who already know it, how are we enriching them? So just having those 4 guiding questions really kind of keeps us on track and focused. We do have a space in there. We always start out with some celebrations, just kind of what's going well this week. Sometimes it's really hard to pull out those celebrations, but we always find something. And then, at the end, we always just talk about like, what do you need moving forward? What are the supports that are needed? What are the barriers? How can we get around those? So between that and then having norms established, like the PLCs together, each one kind of developed, we gave like some guidelines of what norms might be, but we thought it was more important that the teams develop those norms together. And it really, I mean, they're operating like the professionals they are, and for the most part, I mean, everyone wants to get there and get to work because they know how important it is. So that's what has helped us.
So we have in the chat, okay, the 4 questions. So we are going to make this a template, right? Okay, so what do we want all students to know and be able to, Gabriel, look at you. You're like my stenographer. Okay, and it's close to do 4 questions.
Yeah, similar. I mean, I might have put them in my own language a little bit, but yeah, these are that's exactly what it is. So there might be other teams that are operating on those 4 questions, but it was nice for us to kind of take away, like previously the state had required us to go through like this 5-step process, and our whole time was spent as a team just filling out a form. And I feel like having a form to keep us on task is important, but having it open-ended with these 4 questions, it really helps us to talk about what's most important, and that's the students and what the students are doing. So
and those questions, where they are, I'm not going to say broad, but they leave room for all domains, all grade levels, which I think is really important. Another thing that you said that I think is pivotal, right, is you had people in the PLCs create their own norms. We have all been someone who has been managed, right? And if you don't have a say, you're not going to have that buy-in. So I think it's really important that you are allowing everyone to create their own norms because they are going to want to lean in a little bit more. And I think that's very, very important. Do you have those 4 questions? Is that like a running Google Doc that you all have that is shared?
Yeah, so there is a running doc, and we'll just add to it, each time that we meet. And it's nice we have it in a shared folder, so I can, if I can't be at all the PLCs. I wish I could. I'm able to pull up those documents and just kind of check it out and see what's going on. And sometimes I even pull them up just to look at the celebration, so that when I
Yeah.
see teachers next time, I can be like, hey, so how's, so and so, how's this going? So it's nice to have it organized and in a place where everybody can access it, reflect back to it. And sometimes we'll just link important documents in there, or something that we need at the time, just to have kind of a hub for everything we're talking about.
Yeah, and even just to have like a who's doing what or what is your task, like a follow-up. I am a very forgetful. So if I had something I could access to be like, oh yeah, we did talk about this, and this is my actionable next step, that is huge. Elena, are you doing something similar? How does that conversation look within PLCs? How are you all staying on track?
Yeah, I actually learned the hard way of how to stay on track after the first PLC meeting, but we have our own note-taking form as well. The first time we did it, I started taking notes during the meeting, and then I realized quickly that that was a little bit too difficult. We didn't get through everybody. We kind of went off on tangents. So then the next time I sent out a generic, a Google form with notes to look at before the meeting, and then notes to look at during the meeting, who's going to take the notes during the meeting. And then similar to Mandy, like as the coach, I linked in resources based on, the feedback during the meeting about what they would need for next steps. And it was a nice opportunity for me to be able to be like, hey, you mentioned this in the meeting. Would you like me to come in and give you a demo? Or would you like me to come and watch you, try that strategy out with a small group, and we can work on it together. So it was expanding, taking what we had done in the PLC and putting it into action in the classroom based on their feedback. So it was great. So the before, during, and after has been really helpful for us.
The before is huge,
Yeah.
right? Because you could go in and then just to you drop, or kids went to whatever, maybe music or their next period, you get your water, your snack, you come down. You need like a few minutes to like unwind, and then to get those wheels turning again takes a second. So I think it's so helpful to have like that pre-work almost, not like homework, but hey, this is what we're talking about. So as you're walking, just start thinking, right? And I think that's super helpful just to be transparent, right? This is not, some big brother looking in. This is we are focusing on the kids. We are here working together. I think that's massive. And I like that you made this an opportunity to grow, right? You're like, that first one was a little rough. But I mean, like we said, a slow process. You don't want the first one to go out the ballpark in the first one. And I like that you use that as a teachable moment to like, how can we shift what this needs to look like? This is like next steps, right? So now that you've been working on this, right? You saw what the first one looked like. Now you're going through, what are your steps? What are your next steps, right? Like, what do you hope for this year to look like?
Well, I hope that, since it will be with many of the same teachers, that, we're going to build on what we've done last year. So I'm hoping that I, as the facilitator, do much less of the talking, and the teachers do much more of their talking. Be like, hey, this is what's working in my room. We tried that strategy last year with those students. I'm going to start from the get-go with that strategy this year. I'm hoping that it's much more, there's more buy-in from the teachers in every setting. And also we hope to bring in, like I said earlier, more teachers from different settings to really lift the level of our literacy instruction for our ML students as well. So that's our goal this year.
Oh, for sure. And that's such great insight for you. Like you're not in every classroom at every moment in time. So for you to hear like that quick snapshot of what different people's perspectives are, that's massive. We love like a quick notes, right? Especially when a lot can happen in a building in 4 minutes. So that's really that's precious. I love that. Um, Jess, how is it looking? How are you keeping things structured? How are you keeping the mollies at bay? Is the biggest question.
Well, first, Elena, I just want to tell you, you sound like you're an excellent coach. The way you just said that you support them is A plus. That sounds really good.
Thank
But I think that for us, our PLCs look different every time. We don't have like an agenda. We do exactly the same thing every time. I feel like I tried that back when I was a coach, and it just never, because you get stuck on one thing and that's where the need is. So you live there and then it feels like you didn't get through it, and that's frustrating. So in my role now, similar to what Elena said, we always send out an agenda first, and the agenda is either planning focused or reflection focused. So when it's
Ooh.
reflection focused, it is okay, we taught this unit, let's pool all of our common assessment scores. How did the kids perform? Let's look at our, our local data thing that we use. That's kind of like M-Class. Let's look at that and see, did the intervention match up? Was there alignment there? Is there changes that need to be made? And those things serve two purposes. One, do we need to make adjustments to curriculum and instruction in the classroom? And two, is there additional support that's needed for some of those kids that didn't quite meet the mark before moving into unit 2? So sometimes meetings are like that. Other times they're more planning focused. So it might look like right now, for example, we just have quite a deficit with fraction understanding in 6th grade, more than we had before in the past, and it's just a big need. And so for that PLC, we're in grade alike teams because it doesn't make sense for all of us to be together, because sometimes we are for the reflection one. But the 6th grade team might be together saying, okay, like let's go through and look at what resources align to this that come before that. What are the prereqs in grades 5 and 4? What lessons are really conceptually focused because they're missing concept? What's going to push flexibility and reasoning? How can we, build confidence in them and have some not only accessible tasks, but things that make them feel like they're learning and growing, because we don't want them to put a wall up and give up. So those are more of the planning focus sessions. And I would say the way we keep them like focused is just, it's like the teachers are bought in because they need it. They need it to move forward and figure out what they're doing and plan. And also because I really try to empower them to kind of own the meeting. So I'm there, but I just show up as a support, or what do you need, or what can I get for you, or what time do I need to, craft for you to finish this, whatever it is. And I'm not always there. I'm there most of the time though. And so is our other administrators, principals and assistant principals. They're usually in the data meetings and I'm usually in the PLMs. We kind of share it that way, but someone's there just to check in and say, what do you guys need? And I've never gone in and seen them off task ever. Like because the time is precious and they need it and they want to get the work done. They do have their fun time in the beginning. What crazy thing happened? There's like an underground clone ring happening, in the 6th grade, and
Ooh.
they're selling things to each other. All those conversations have happened, but
Yeah, hopefully Axe has like taken a back seat. Hopefully we're going into better smelling things.
yeah.
But I think that that speaks volumes about the three of you, right? You're saying, you know, it is working even if I'm not there. I can't be there at every one, and that speaks volumes about what you have already put into place, right? Where your teachers know that this is important, it's benefiting them, it's benefiting the building, the school, the kids, everyone, but also like you're creating a well-oiled machine of growth, which is huge. So kudos to the three of you. I love what we've heard, right? To keep us on track, like what Mandy said, right? We're going to have those four guiding questions that are consistent each and every time. Jess, I love having the reflection piece and then the planning piece. I think having two lenses, right, is really important. That's huge. And I feel like making sure that we reflect on what we've done, the reflection piece, we need that, right? We put work in place. We've got to reflect on it. Now, I've asked Elena her reflection of this all. Mandy, what is your hopes for this year with how this is going to look in your building? I know that you've done this, right? For this is year 2, correct? So making sure that some of those kinks from year 1 are worked out, but what are your hopes for this year?
Yeah, I just want to continue with the work that we've done. I feel like we have so much momentum right now. We saw a lot of progress in our students last year going into this year, and I think that has given all of us just hope. It's given all of our teachers just the motivation to keep up all the hard work that we're doing. The one kind of, I guess, dream that I have for this is that we can extend this more. I mean, in our PLCs, we are talking about all content areas, but to be fair, literacy has kind of taken the biggest chunk because last year we were year one implementation of CKLA, first year using M-Class, we have state legislation guiding us. And I think, we know that math and science and social studies are equally important. And so just kind of steer those conversations to give equity to all the content areas. So that, and then also being able to kind of bring in some innovation. Like one of our district's goals is to be innovating our practices with our students. So I feel like now that we're getting our tier 1 instruction more solid and sound, we can really start taking off and doing some innovative things with our students. And
I love that.
Yeah, and through the PLC process and being able to bounce ideas off of each other, we are starting to see that happen.
It is, I told you, I'm a STEM girly by heart. So like literacy is always like the favorite child, unfortunately. So I'm glad that you make sure that we are being cross-disciplined, right? Because yeah, they might have deficits in one subject, but let's celebrate, like you do, the strength that they have in another subject, or how can we tie in what we're doing in math into science so we can really hit it twice. Elena, what are you doing to make sure that science are, well, we won't talk science, we'll talk math, right? How are you making sure that literacy and math are both getting mom and dad's full support here?
Well, I work very closely with the math coaches in our district. So and then from some of these PLCs, we've noticed that if we didn't have pull-out support in, let's say, kindergarten, the math coach and I worked together in a building to do a pilot program to try to do some pull-out work. We worked on the schedule. We worked on the data from what, the math programs data, the literacy programs data, and we worked on, with the teachers on a pilot program, and that worked really, really well. So we're going to try to do that again this year. So just the fact that, ELA and math are working together.
That's amazing. And the more that we can talk about them in the same breath, the more that our kids will see them in the same breath as well. Someone in the chat, Sarah, is like, yes, let's talk about cross-curricular and the planning of it because it doesn't happen enough. And I think it's really insightful, right? Like just in the intermediate space, when a grade level team comes together, I might not have any idea what's happening in social studies or math or literacy, right? If I'm in science. So to hear that and be like, oh, I could lend myself there, that is where the real beauty of this comes into play, right? The meeting of the minds. I'm looking at the time and I'm like, you know what? We are here for a good time, not a short time. I know that we have like 7 minutes left, but we have so much more to talk about. The biggest one that I taught in inner city Baltimore, which was a beautiful experience for me. It was very eye-opening for me. But one thing that was very hard was the caregiver and community involvement. And in this MTSS framework, we have to make sure that caregivers know what's happening. And it's very important that we're making sure that, yes, they know it, but they also might have things that they could follow up with or the community aspect of it. That's like where I want this to go. How are we relaying what is happening in the building outside of the building, whether it's to families or caregivers or who needs to hear it? Jess, what is happening and what strategies do you have for all of our friends that are here? Ryan's like, Molly, we will block off. Ryan, make sure that the kids come home from daycare upstairs and I will be here all night, okay? Jess, what are you doing to make sure that everyone is in the know with what's happening with kids?
So we have our principals are really excellent with this. They do a really, really good job of making sure that everyone understands not only what's happening and why it's happening, and often the why it's happening comes from, teacher concerns that arise and we address them and support them the best that we can. But also what processes and protocols are in place. You know, if you are noticing a need, if something pops up, who do you go and talk to first? Where do you give the referral? How do we start with support in the classroom before we, you know, say, hey, this person has to go in an intervention right away? You know, it's kind of, I feel like before MTSS, it was like whenever kids expressed or showed any kind of gap or misunderstanding, it was like, oh, they must be special education. Let's just write the IEP right now, which is just awful. You know, a learning disability is a real thing, and it's not the same thing as gaps. They just tend to coincide with one another. So I feel like educating about that was kind of the starting point a few years ago. And then, you know, getting processes in place to make sure everyone understands, like, hey, what's expected at the tier 1 level and where are your supports for that? And then what would constitute a move to tier 2? And then how would you engage in that process? And then our families are aware that we have these because we're very good at just pumping out communications to them via email, newsletters, through our school board to share, like, hey, there's new courses that are addressing this, or there's a new time chunk in the elementary that's addressing this, whatever it is. Here's why it's there. You'll hear more from the folks in the school if you know your student is showing a need and is a great candidate for it. And then obviously we all, you know, we seek permissions from parents to include them in any of the interventions, make sure we have rationale and support because it is a partnership. And so that's how we just continue, and then we progress monitor and we share progress reports about how kids are performing with families.
And that's rich, right? We want everyone to be in the know, number one. But also that helps the student, right? They're not like, oh, I'm at school for this many hours and it's such a disconnect from when I go home and nobody knows. It's like, no, no, no. We're all here. We are all your team, but we're all going to be that thumb to make sure you're staying where you need to. We have questions in the chat that we're going to get to. But before we do that, we're going to each go around. If you were to give one big tip or big advice for someone who is trying to get these wheels turning in their school or their district, what is one thing that has been like wildly successful, or maybe like Elena, like, oh, we learned the hard way, but what is one big tip or trick or advice that you would give to someone who's up and coming with this process? Elena, I'm going to kick it off to you. I said your name. We're going to start you there.
I think that the best thing is to, and I'm type A too, but I just be okay with going slow, because it's a process. You're trying to change a system. So going slow will benefit you in the long run. So be okay with the slower pace.
It's hard, right? You're like, I want to see that paint drying right now.
Yeah. And you know, sometimes when you know what the next 3 steps are, but the people that you're working with don't, like, it's just because you know it's not going to benefit anybody if they're not on board yet. So going slower, making sure everybody understands, you know, the goals and why we're doing this, why we're looking at this data so many times a year, and what we want to accomplish from that. Going slow is better.
Yeah, and that ties in with Sarah in the chat. She said, adopt it and learn it yourself, and then show your coworkers the why. This is why this is going to work. Mandy, what is your seed of advice?
Well, similar to what Elena said, I mean, go slow to go fast, most definitely. You've got to create those structures. You have to have the time, the space. You have to have all your ducks in a row before you can really roll up your sleeves and get to work. But we know it's important work. So even if it looks messy in the beginning, you know, as we say in our district, we're chasing progress, not perfection, and just kind of keep that in mind as you go through this. And the other thing that kind of was a mind shift for me is the PLC is not just a meeting that you go to. Like, your team is the PLC. You are the professional learning community, and that work never stops. It's not only done in that 40-minute meeting that you have. You know, you are finding other ways to be able to meet the needs of all your students, and it really is kind of a hands-on deck approach. So you have other ways of trying to, everything you're doing in your classroom every day is part of that community with the help of your team.
We're going to add that as the third sticker, chasing progress, not perfection. Ryan, put it on the books. Okay, dear. Jess, I'm going to end it with you. Your words of wisdom for everyone who's looking to make this kind of change within their own 4 walls.
I would agree with everything Elena and Mandy said, but the other thing I would say is don't think because you don't have all the pieces, you can't do anything. Something is better than nothing. You know, we don't have it perfect yet. I think that we're in a great place with working on tier 1, and now we have a tier 2 that literally just rolled out this year, but it's been like 2 years of work on tier 1 prior to that to like get that right. And we don't really have a perfect tier 3 right now. It's kind of all over the place, but I would say we barely have it. So I wouldn't say like just because you don't have it all, don't do anything. Something is better than nothing, and that starting small and going slow is important because that's how you start to acquire data and show progress and have proof for all the players that, hey, this does really work and we need to invest time, energy, and money into it. So.
Amazing. The three of you have made my entire week. It is only Wednesday, and my entire, whatever happens next 2 days does not even matter. Thank you all for joining today to share your expertise. I know this has been wildly helpful for not just me, but for everyone. And if you haven't seen the chat, it is like a beautiful novel. We should just, Ryan, not a sticker. We're going to bind it as a book and send it out. Ryan's like Molly enough. I know that we're over. But if there's any questions that you think, Ryan, are really resonating in the Q&A that we should bring up, Ryan's like, Molly. No.
No, you guys were phenomenal. And Molly, I appreciate all of the additional work that you just gave me on this call. Thank you so much. There was one question that was kind of a common theme, so I think it would be really great for us to answer this question. 2 different people asked, how would you structure a PLC for a small school that only has 1 teacher per grade? And one teacher specifically asked about K-5 specifically. So I'd love to hear if you guys have any feedback for them.
So I will jump in because we have very small buildings in our district and large buildings. So I would say if you have 1 teacher per grade, you should probably structure it as a K2 initiative, PLC time, and a 3-5 or 3-4, however that works for you, because you're going to see more overlap, I think, with your primary teachers working together, and it's nice to see that vertical articulation, and the same with your 3-5.
Thank you so much. Anybody else? If not, I can go ahead and start to close us out. Okay, well, I need to try and find my slides because you're never going to believe it, Molly, but they disappeared. But I've already found them again. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up my slides and I'll go ahead and close this out. We'd love to invite you all to join us for our Science of Reading Comprehension Connections webinar next week. We have a whole bunch of incredible sessions that are going to be coming up. Some featuring Susan Lambert, who is absolutely incredible. So if you are a literacy teacher as well, we'd love to invite you to join us for these sessions. Otherwise, I'm just going to close out with a few other additional helpful resources from Amplify. We have one more assessment and intervention webinar session tomorrow at 4 p.m. And we'd love to invite you all there to take a little bit more of a deep dive into M-Class math and see how we handle asset-based assessment here at Amplify. Kelly Serpa-Howe is our incredible speaker for this session, and like she's just such a treat and just such a joy, just as much as Molly is. So I know if you enjoyed Molly today, you'll enjoy Kelly tomorrow. So join us. You can register for that session at amplify.com/assessment-week. We would encourage you to grab your own asset-based assessment ebook from us to kind of start looking at what ways you can start implementing asset-based assessment into your own curriculum. You can access that at bit.ly/assessment.ebook. And if you'd like to find more professional learning resources surrounding problem-based learning, we do have a back-to-school starter pack. It is marketed as back-to-school, but you can use it all year long. And you can grab that at bit.ly/plb-starter-pack. That is so many incredible great resources in there that I'd really encourage you to download. And if you're looking for any more final professional development learning opportunities, we have so many incredible webinars coming up and so many incredible on-demand webinars that you can access as well at amplify.com/mathwebinars. Thank you all so much for joining us. And I just want to say like a special thank you to all of our panelists today. You guys were Absolutely wonderful. I appreciated all of your incredible insights. And like Molly said, the chat was like going crazy this whole session. So I don't think I've seen an active chat like this before. So it was so phenomenal. I really do agree with Molly's statement that it was kind of like our own little PLC. So thank you so much to you ladies that joined us today. And thank you to everybody who participated as a viewer. But with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and close this out. Thank you all so much for joining us and have a great rest of your evening.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.